And okay, I think we're good. My name's Greg. I'm from Sprinter, and also one of the co-founders at ChainSafe. And today I'm going to be talking about markets specifically pertaining to solvers and the solver market, where it sits today, and a little bit of an in-depth analysis on kind of like where it can go to be economically viable. And so just a quick, recap on what solvers are. Basically, it's just off-chain code, whether it's an agent or just code itself, that's effectively trying to find an optimal solution given a user outcome. A user outcome can be I want a token, could be I want to go somewhere, could be I want to enter a certain position on a specific chain. You figure out the solver figures out based on the user's point of view, their worldview of what they have, where they are, to basically get them to that spot in a simplified manner. There's two popularized solvers today. There's a third one that I won't be discussing. And so the two ones are AMM solvers. If anyone here has used CowSwap, then that's that's run by about 21 solvers. And then there's cross-chain solvers found in like Across, which is the most popular one, dBridge, Synapse, and a few others. And so those ones have slightly different variations, right? They all do the same thing, which the first thing they need to do is ensure they have adequate liquidity or find liquidity. In the CowSwap case, a lot of them use on-chain liquidity to source that. And the main difference you see is that there's route optimization on the AMM side, where versus on the cross-chain side, it's simply, do you have the liquidity on the other side, on the other chain where the user wants to go? Just give it to them. The cross-chain solvers are a little bit dumber. They're just like a very simple relay, whereas the AMM ones, it's a game of whack-a-mole. You're effectively constantly optimizing your algorithm to just like get that extra 1 cent spread out. And so the competition between the two is a little bit different, which we'll get into a little bit. But this is just some primer, make sure we're all there. And quickly, solvers aren't very new. CowSwap introduced them in 2021. They were popularized. They were first talked about by the Anoma team. Chris Goes kind of like standardized the concept of intents and that a solver, an off-chain agent, would have to execute on that to make it work. And in 2022 to 2024, solvers are everywhere. Uniswap's launched them. We've got things like Across. We have things like 1-inch Fusion. They're basically dominating. And at this point, about 30 to 40% of total DEX volume alone is being routed through some sort of solver. Most people aren't. The trend is going to that way because you get better price discovery. And the trend is just continuing. It's growth month over month. And even cross-chain protocols, we're starting to see a big dominance happen there. Obviously, the message passing bridges, still peak, but it's starting to take over. And that's just simply because you can get the best price by hopping through a series of tokens through different liquidity sources rather than just going to Uniswap. A really good example is you want to go from USDC to some shitcoin, and there's a really good chance that like USDC to ETH on Uniswap will give you a better price pair than you can go to Balancer and then eventually go back to Uniswap and then get your, fart coin, and that's the best path, but as a user, you'd never do that. And you could actually extract an extra couple percentage points that way. That's why it's taking off, is because they're optimizing dramatically. Running a solver isn't the cheapest operation. And it looks cheap when you see this. That doesn't look too bad per month, right? Like 100 something K. That's like the most bare bones minimal setup. That's not playing whack-a-mole. That's not really doing R&D. This isn't accounting for penalties. And this also doesn't account for the fact that this is a game of BPS, which means it's a game of volume. If you're only making 1 BPS on a trade, you need to be doing a serious amount of volume to be considered profitable. And so it's a very tough game. Most of these teams scale up to 4 or 6 people. This is like basically like 1 or 2 engineering staffing members. And so as you start to add more sources to get more order flow, this becomes a very expensive game, and it's very, very competitive. And lightly talk on this. So if we see in the second column here, volume and revenue, I think this is the most important one. We see that CowSwap distributes about 25%, roughly a quarter of their, actually less, about a quarter of their total revenue to solvers. That's about 570 ETH. Gets distributed back to the solvers who are doing the work. The rest of it sits there. This was last year's January till today, till April, where in across, you can see that they don't take a fee and that just goes direct to solver. In both, in the across case, the average fee is like 2-3 basis points unless you go private liquidity, private order flow, sorry, where you might have a deal where that you can get it higher. Otherwise, you're dealing with about razor thin margins, like 1 to 3 BPS. And what's important to talk about is their auction models. CowSwap has a relatively complicated auction model. It uses a mix of second price batched and off-chain sealed bids. What that really means is that you feed in a quote from the CowSwap server, basically saying, hey, a user feeds in basically a trade that they want, and that trade basically comes back to the solvers, and the solvers give a quote. CowSwap tries to batch them, as well as the solvers try to batch them to net them, and then that gets the best bid, gets revealed at the end. It's a bit complicated, but it gets a pretty good price, and there's some problems that we'll talk about in a bit. And the difference is here, 21 solvers in CowSwap and 78. We do expect this one to drop down dramatically, which I'm about to talk about right now. I think we're probably going to see like 3 to 5 in the coming months due to the economics of it. So these are all the solvers that are participating in CowSwap. We've obfuscated the names intentionally just to make sure that there's no reason to be talking about people here, but so you can understand the market share. As you can see, Talos takes a pretty good amount of the total volume, but they absolutely smoke everybody in the competition, getting about 50% of the fees. And there's a reason for this. In the green trapezoid-like diagram, shaded area, this is what we call the survival zone. This is what it takes to break even. Just bare minimum. Just bare minimum. You've got like 1 or 2 engineers. You're just trying to do this. This is what it costs to go break even. There's 3 people in the survivor zone. There's 1 person, and it's that Talos one, that's well above the survival zone, so they are making profit, probably about like 2 to 3 ETH per day. Everybody else is underneath the trapezoid. For the last year and a half, everybody has been underneath the green shaded area. Everybody is dying. There's multiple reasons. A lot of people will run this code, will compete on CowSwap purely for the algorithmic reasons so that they can sell services elsewhere. So they take it as kind of like an engineering R&D loss. But generally speaking, the auction model, like the way it works today, does not work extremely well. And we're talking like what, 10, 20K a month? Nobody's making money. The main reason is the x-axis here is what we call the ideal reward. So this is what you would receive should you have actually like won the auction and there were no errors, reverts, or penalties applied during the process, because that can happen in many different ways. And then the y-axis is your capture ratio. So this is like how many of those auctions you're actually winning. You can see at the top right here, there's a big bulk of people that win a ton of auctions, right? So they basically capture a ton, but they get hit with so many penalties that they can barely get to that 50 ETH ideal reward. So this is a bit of a problem, obviously. The main reason for it, I don't have it on that slide. The main reason for this is due to liquidity. It's a fundamental problem of liquidity. If you can price your liquidity slightly cheaper, and a lot of this comes from the SEX-DEX arbitrage or simply larger market makers being able to have access to funds, you're able to price your liquidity a penny less than everybody else in the market because you know what all the going rates are. And so you're able to win literally every single auction. And this is just like a fundamental issue of how it happens, because these guys are all algorithmic traders. These 2 right here are like very unique. They are algorithmic traders that are like the best in the business, and they're barely squeaking by. That's CowSwap. So if we look at across, we have a very kind of similar setup going up here. You can see there's like one dominant player. That dominant player kind of takes everything. Across is a bit of like cross-chain protocols are a bit of an inventory game. It's about how much inventory you have, how quickly is it rebalanced, and how efficient you are at just being fast to produce. What we have in the x-axis is the amount of volume they're doing, And then what we have on the y-axis is the total bips you're taking. What we'll see here is Nessus. This is a unique one. So if we look before, they take up over 50%, both on fees and volume. Main reason, this is the foundation solver. It's basically backstopping all the trades that don't go through. So if we remove that one, you can see that the survival zone's a lot, keep pushing the wrong button. The survival zone's a lot better. It's like this nice thin line. But as you can see, we scored 2 extra solvers. That's great. 2 more. Surviving. This is because the markets have competed everybody down to 1 BPS, fundamentally. The aggregators, everything, driving the price down. And it's fine, it's good for now. It's a volume game. But we still see this exact same issue where pretty much everybody is in this giant survival zone where they're barely making money. And again, a lot of this is due to the fact that they're offering products and services outside of this. Fundamentally, though, what it does mean is we're in a bit of a winner-takes-all situation. And so no matter how many solvers we introduce, how much liquidity we jam into this, at the end of the day, the outcome is trending towards the same thing across all the various different markets, no matter how different they are in nature and what they're supposed to be doing. And the biggest alpha in this whole spectrum is liquidity, right? I believe the biggest solver, the biggest solver right here, I believe. See, this is how much solver inventory they have. Sorry, I forgot to cover that, right? The biggest solver here is carrying about 9 mil of inventory. Everybody else is barely holding on to like 1 to 2. That's the main reason they're not profitable. They don't have enough inventory across all the chains against all the assets that they need done. That increases, reward increases. We start to see people probably enter this region very quickly. And so liquidity is the fundamental alpha in solving. And it's how, whether it's pennying on the AMM side or whether it's just having access to deep liquidity to do cross-chain solves, that is the main alpha. And without it, it's, you're done. You just can't compete. And when, this talks about markets more than the liquidity side. And so if we talk about markets, the question comes, what can we learn from TradFi? Truly, TradFi does a lot of things really well, does a lot of things really poorly. But what's really done really well is the market maker side because it's super efficient. If we remove the, illegal stuff that tends to happen. We have 0 checks on antitrust contestability. I question if that's even required on chain, but that is a thing, right? These do not exist. The same thing with structural separation. If one solver just starts buying up all the other solvers or the infra, is that a problem? Something worth bringing up. I mean, this kind of happens in the PBS pipeline, as it is today, but, one of the big issues that exists across all the markets is the fact that settlement in the AMM spectrum is not public. Settlement is public, but the quoting is not, meaning we really don't know what price feeds are getting fed in, how people are doing it. And it's one of those things that this is probably best solved through a T, as it gives you the ability to actually have a very rigid structure, and you can start to reveal this data privately. And yeah, so that's one of the big ones. Where am I? Ah, yes. Oh, no, I'm going to skip over this slide. Yeah, so the other kind of spectrum we see here is that, you could relate this a lot to the block production side, cool, where the same kind of things come up. And so if all the wallets, all the apps start moving to basically intent-based networks, you can get a one-to-one map of what's happening in the block production space as a kind of reality of what will probably happen in the solving space if we don't change the way our auction mechanisms works and the general markets in themselves. Because we'll basically just end up with 2 players dominating the entire thing. And I guess this becomes a moral question, as the people integrating them or building out intent networks, if that matters to you. But it's going to happen because it's happening right now, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And so, there are some suggestions we have here that could help to improve that. And I'm running a bit on time. And that could basically help fix some of this stuff. A lot of it's role and separation. What happens during that auction period, who's in charge of what, can actually dramatically improve the centralization that would occur inside of these auction mechanisms, as well as in an idealistic world, there's a shared liquidity index, so we don't have to recompute this every time, because you have to think those 21 solvers on CowSwap are literally recomputing the exact same code 21 times. Every single transaction that goes in, they're repeating the same thing, and they're recomputing the same liquidity sources, and so it's a bit of a wasted effort. Yeah. And so kind of where can we go from here? There's a few paths that can take, right? Today we're fully centralized. As I was trying to say before, we could go down the path of something like a solver.net, very similar to what the Flashbots team is trying to do with BuilderNet. That could try to democratize it a little bit more and try and get the auction mechanisms a little bit tighter, or the RFQs. And then I think the idealistic version, the crypto ethos of me says that realistically the solver code should exist directly at the wallet. This should be done that you can do locally. I believe we can get to that within a few years, and I think that's where realistically most of this will end up going, as it's just table stakes to get borderline the exact same infra going. And that's everything. Thank you guys for coming here. If you are curious about that or working on that, please let me know. At Sprinter, we're solvers, and we also are working on getting access to liquidity solvers. So if this is interesting to you, I'm around, and you can get Alex and Nadim's Twitter, who also helped write a lot of this presentation. Thank you, and I have 1 minute for a question, so I can take one. Yes.
You talk about getting the infra for this in the wallet level. What would this look like? You see that every time we add anything to wallets for anything infra or extra solutions, people bitch and moan about bloat.
Yeah. So the question is repeat.
Okay, I could do the talking about kind of getting infra for this kind of at the solver level in a wallet. But every time we do anything to MetaMask or Phantom or anything, people bitch about bloat, and it ends up being a huge burden on the usability side. What does this look like to you that isn't intrusive for
A lot of this is what we call pathfinding.
Yeah.
So it's literally stitching together what's available where they are.
Sure.
And I do believe that will get, what's the word I'm looking for? AI will help bring that to a medium.
Sure.
And so that will become, I believe, so simple that also if we have liquidity indexing, right, where we have easy indexes to get access to where the liquidity's at, it should be trivial to do it directly in wallet versus outsourcing.
Yeah. I look forward to a day where I have a phone that's able to do liquidity routing whilst I've got Trust Wallet open, but I don't think we're there anytime soon.
We're soon. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.